Okay, so this is just going to be a very rough video with very rough cuts and transitions here, not meant to be anything special, about how to automate this stupid thing, which I hate with a passion because it's awful, having sided inputs and then blah 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 blah. This pack is the Divine Journey 2 mod pack, but this will apply anywhere that you really need a bunch of this stuff with the alchemy table. So the first problem with the alchemy table is that it's sided. Inputs in the top, I think, are for the blood orb. Inputs on the side are for these slots here. You can lock them to prevent inputs, but that's not very useful, at least right now. And the bottom is going to be the output here. You can definitely input from all sides, but the problem is that if you get a hopper, and we just get a bunch of random crap, we'll just throw all this stuff in there. So we'll take out the variable cards, and we'll take that out, and we'll take that out, and we'll take that out, and we'll take that out. And you can see that it does put all the stuff into the slots. The problem is when you start getting into duplicates. So things, for example, like item slots are arranged as follows: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this should, in theory, if I remember to put the variable card in, split the items evenly from the chest into the table. So if we put that in there, it should split them evenly, but you can see it does not. And this can lead to some issues where crafting recipes end up having duplicate resources only in a single slot. So for example, let's take a look at this. That's the wrong button. Let's take a look at the strengthening catalyst. It requires 2 simple catalysts. In this instance, there is a possibility that both catalysts, or both of those simple catalysts, end up in the same slot, and the crafting won't start because they have to be in. It has to be done as shown here. 2 catalysts in their own slot and 2 blaze powder in their own slot. So that would not work. That kind of throws you for a loop, especially when you have to connect all 4 of these sides here. All 6 of these sides here. And in theory, assuming that you were doing something, let's say this recipe, where all of the ingredients are different, it would theoretically, or not theoretically, it would in actual real world use case export all items via all slides to each specific slot and not have an issue. Water buckets are unstackable in this pack, so that wouldn't be an issue. But something like a simple catalyst might export more than once through the same item exporter and end up kind of split, or not end up kind of split unevenly. And then as your interface pushes stuff, you would kind of get halted because of them not being sorted evenly between the slots. So try as hard as I might, I was unable to find a way to solve this. People were largely unhelpful, in at least from what I was able to see in the DJ2 server. As far as I could tell, there were a bunch of people that had to do things a specific way to get it to work. Now you can potentially use like super advanced integrated dynamics functions. Let's see, for example, the block reader, and end up reading all of the NBT data in here. So if we go to the block reader, oh, that's not the right button. I forgot about this issue with stupid integrated dynamics, is that you have to have a cable connected in order to interface with a block manually. Thanks, game. It's just stupid design. Anyway, there were some suggestions to use tile NBT data and take a look at what items are in the table. But the problem with that is that specifically doesn't work when you have multiple recipes. So in our case, we want to take these 2 recipes. Both of them require some same ingredient types in different slots. The issue with that is that if you were to import into the table, let's say you needed 2 logistics cables in 2 separate slots, they would both be called logistics cables, and they would technically have the same NBT, so that didn't work. So the second suggestion was to use the item renaming that you can do with inscribers and the rename inscriber press. But that's really a crap ton of work, and I do not give a shit to do that. So instead I found a much more, I guess, janky solution, but it does work with wildcards. And wildcard in this context is for every crafting recipe, it has a wild number of items, or not a wild number of items, but a wild set of item types. We're going to be looking at specifically the ones that take 6 to craft, although this can be applied to anything that takes less. You just have to put in a little bit less work for it, though there are other ways to do it with the same table, and I haven't found them yet. But I digress. The goal is for a wild set of items, these 6 items right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, to be put into the table and then crafted without having them kind of jumble up and get halted when the crafting reaches the state where 2 slots are empty and some slots aren't filled. So one of the other issues that I ran into is with buckets, because buckets take the frickin' resource out of the bucket and leave the bucket in the table. But with the normal way, since buckets would technically be fine, that's not where you want to put it, you can't actually extract buckets from the bottom, from what I could see. You have to extract them from the side because they're in this part of the table. They're not in the center. So we use up all the sides of the table here, and that kind of makes things not that great for exporting the buckets. So that's unfortunate. My solution to this is a little bit more interesting. We need the regular interface to issue the crafting job, and I saw some people use impulse hoppers, some people use certain types of filters. I looked at various types of filters. These precise item filters, but they filter precise items into a location. They don't filter precise item into item slots. I looked at existing item filters. Those also do the same thing. The existing item filters, you right-click them on a table. Let's just grab them. And let's grab exactly one. And it will tell you exactly what's in the table. And we go and take a look at the thing. We click show. You can see that all of these are in the table. But the problem with that is we need to go and clear it. Clear, filter. So now you can see that they're all separate, right? We got 2 stacks of these variable things. We got 2 stacks of the item exporters, and we got some variable card and an inventory reader. If we click show, it just shows the 4, and it's going to export exactly that, which is not what we want. We don't want that. We want to specifically export items into the slots they are given. So we got options. At least in this pack, you can make use of this lovely thing called the Ender Porcupine with a GUI that is complete garbage and the fact that it requires grid power. This is awful, although it will work. What you can do with the Ender Porcupine, because this GUI is so awful and I fucking hate it, you can tell it to select part of the block, and then it will act as an extension of the block. So you can still interface with it. You just interface with the Ender Porcupine instead, and the interface will, and the interfaces of the porcupine will get will be over here instead. Right clicking on the porcupine won't bring you to the inventory. You still have to go to the inventory. But fuck that, because the porcupine is a terrible option. So we're gonna use phantom faces instead. Phantom faces are fucking awesome. It took me a while to realize their potential. So we'll just go ahead and take a look at the phantom faces real quick. They can link to the block, and we're gonna need quite a few of these phantom faces. Actually, we're going to need for the sake of demonstration, I think we're going to need about 4 phantom faces for this. They do have a terrible crafting recipe in this pack, Ender casings, switch machine casings, and all this stupid crap. But at this point, if you're probably doing AE automation, you probably have other forms of automation as well, including auto crafting, which we just have a miniature auto crafting set up over here. You probably have auto crafting, so you should be able to craft all this stuff on demand. Or have a good chunk of it stocked. So we're going to use these phantom faces, and what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to link this to any side of the block. So we're going to link that there, we're going to link that there, we're going to link that there, and now all 3 are linked, and we're going to need I believe you're going to need a 4th one as well. Now we got phantom faces, and what we're going to go ahead and do is, instead of connecting the item exporters here, we're actually going to go ahead and connect the item exporters here. And I'm going to go ahead and do this instead on this side. So now that we've got these item exporters set up, you can actually open them without connecting a cable to them, so we'll go ahead and do that. There are options to interface with the block. We could go ahead, that's actually not needed because it's literally a cable. There are options to interface with the block. You could potentially use the block reader. You could use, I think, you can use the inventory reader. You can also use to straight up the interface. I am going to actually make use of the inventory reader. Now, the biggest problem here is that if we go ahead and we click on this thing, we get the option export all items, but we can only export it to a specific slot, and there is no way, as far as I can tell, or to export a specific amount of items to a specific slot with an item exporter. You can export items. You can export item. It would be nice if I could export to item slots and specify a list of items to export to an item slot, but there is no option. You can only export to one item slot. If you put a list into export item slot, it will fail as it requires an integer. So that sucks. Not sure why it's designed like that, but whatever, it's fine. So what we're going to go ahead and do instead is we're going to use these inventory readers. And these inventory readers can go ahead on these sides, and they're going to be correlated directly across from the item exporter that they are managing. And we'll just go ahead and connect these up. There we go. See, these are all now connected, which is great. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we are actually going to go ahead and grab some of these variable cards. So what we're going to go ahead and do off the bat is we're actually going to put a variable store down here because we do need a variable store. So we'll go ahead and drop that variable store. We'll go ahead, actually, let's drop it over here because we're going to need that space later. I guess what we can go ahead and do right now, as we could probably go ahead and do it right now, is we can actually just take this right here, and we need the wrench, this stupid thing. 64 of them. Wow, thanks. And we need to set this to an interface to import into the to import back into the ME system for return items. And we're going to put an importer there and an importer there. Now the importer here is connected to this block on the side so that we can import things that get that have their contents used but end up remaining in the table. So for example, things like stupid buckets, which empty the contents of the bucket but leave the bucket in the table, since you for some reason can't export them from here, normally at least. And it doesn't seem like they are accessible no matter which slot you set it to. Somebody can correct me in the comments. So doing it like this and having the buckets exported is kind of necessary so you don't clog the table. And this one is connected to the bottom of the Phantom interface, which all these interfaces are connected here, so any bottom of those interfaces would do. But that one's closer, so it's going to export the product, which is that right there, back into the system as a return. What we also need to do is we need to set an item importer on the chest. This interface is going to be set into blocking mode, so we don't put more items in there than we need, which is excellent. We'll go ahead and set that here, and we'll set that there. That's incorrect. That's very wrong. You want to put an interface, not an importer. It's applied energistics like setup. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is we are going to go ahead and grab some interface cards, or not interface cards, grab some of these stupid variable cards. And what we need to do with these stupid variable cards is we need to take a look at the, could you please click on there? There we go. Click on the item slot here. Now, or the inventory reader, and we are going to go all the way down past all of this garbage. Item list would be nice, but that doesn't work for our suited purpose. It will work for crafting if you want to do crafting with ID, but we're not doing crafting. We're just doing direct dumb export from an inventory. We're going to go down to slot, and what we're going to go ahead and do is we're actually going to grab the slot ID, and so the slot ID for this one is 0, and we're going to go ahead and go down to this one here, and we're going to set the slot ID for this one to be 1. We'll go ahead and grab that one, so that's 1. We'll go over here, we'll set the slot ID to be 2. We'll grab that slot ID. There's 2. We'll go here and we'll set slot ID to be 3. 3? My mistake. So we'll grab slot ID 3. We'll set this one to be slot ID 4. And we'll grab slot ID 4. Checking to make sure slot ID 4. And we'll go over here and we'll set this one to ID 5. Slot ID 5. So now we have all 6 slots. If you're wondering why 0, computers technically start at 0. So it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 5 is technically slot number 6, which is going to be this one right here. Because we count excluding 0, but computers count 0 inclusive. Which is technically how the base system is supposed to work, but they don't teach you that in school for some reason, unless you get higher in education. Anyway, but that's not really going to do anything, because we need to set these cards to export a specific item to a specific slot. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to grab this logic programmer here, we're going to click on it, and we're going to search for null. This should be super straightforward. And we're going to search for is null. And we're going to put that in there, or slot 1 in there, and we're going to put a variable card down here, and that's going to be set to null. And what we're doing right now is we are creating a bunch of these cards. And what these cards are doing is if this slot, whatever slot the inventory is, so let's say this specific inventory reader, if this slot it is interfacing with is null, then the condition should be true for whichever item exporter is tied to it. So we'll just go ahead and continue with that here. So we have all these variable cards done. These variable cards will go into the item exporter. However, what we're going to go ahead and do right now, actually, is we're going to go ahead and configure these item exporters. So, of all the things we're going to use here, we're actually just going to use export all items, which is simple. So what we are doing right now with null, because I suck at spelling, again, there's a cut right there. If it is null, then it's going to return true. And null requires any input. So if there is any input, then this is going to return false, and the item exporters will no longer be active. But if it is null, then the item exporters will return, or then it will return true, and the item exporters will be active. If you recall, we want it to export into empty slots only, but we want it to export anything into empty slots only. Once a slot becomes filled, we don't want to export again, because we have the chance for duplicate ingredients within a crafting recipe. So I'm on the wrong side here. What I need to do is I need to go over here, and we need to hop over to this thing right here, which is the export all items. Now you're going to have to keep track of these. The way that I'm doing it is logically. This is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to do the same thing over here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to drop this card in here. And it's going to give us an error, but don't worry about that right now. The problem is this card, which this variable card is referencing, is actually not found in the system, which is why we have the variable store over there. So we'll go ahead and fix that later. We're going to leave the channel as 0, or whichever channel you are using, assuming you are using expanded ID networks. We're going to set the item transfer rate to 1, so it only takes one item. We're going to set the exact amount to true, and we'll set the item slot to 0. And we're going to go ahead and do this for every single one, incrementing in item number slots. So we're going to set this to transfer rate of 1, exact amount true, because I can spell, and this item slot is going to be 1 instead of 0. So as you can see, they've all errored because it could not find a variable ID that it is referencing. So we're going to go ahead and put these variable IDs, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which reference all of these, into the network. And these should turn, they're not going to turn because these two halves aren't connected. My mistake. Once we connect them, they should turn. There we go. Now they turn active. And the reason they're active is because there is nothing found in the slot. What we're going to go ahead and do right now is just to show you it works. Looks like I figured out the issue. The operators are set to is not null. They need to be set to is null. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. Must be is null. We put these back in here. 3, 4, 5. And what we should see now when we put that in there is it should take out 6 of them and put them into, or put the same item type, one into every slot, or every specified slot that we have done right here. And if you take one out, it goes back in, and it does not stack. This is exactly the behavior that I was looking for prior. That is how you would automate that. As for the bottom, an empty variable card is true, so we're just going to export all items. We'll set that true. Don't worry about it. That's fine. Except for the side here, we need to get a bucket. A single bucket, preferably. We'll go for an item. Item size, that's the item for the empty buckets. We will put this in import items. If there are other items that get used, you can, instead of using just regular import item, you can use import item list. This will be set to round robin. Transfer rate's fine. Exact amount is not important. Item slot -1, so it'll import a bucket from any slot, assuming that lava gets used. And what we should be able to go ahead and do right now is we should be able to go ahead and craft, so that it has to craft these strengthening catalysts. There we go. So it should start crafting now. It appears as though I am stupid. The reason why the crafting is halted is because you require a different kind of blood orb, such as the Archmage or the Magician's blood orb. So we'll go ahead and put the Archmage one in there, and there we go. Same inputs are getting put in separate slots. Even though it is technically a little bit slower, we are getting it done, and it should complete without any errors at all. And there we go. We now have our 16 concentrated catalysts. We crafted, well, I put some extra stuff in the system to get it started because I'm not going to set up the whole chain. But assuming that your other chain works, this will work too without issue as things get pulled out and put in the interface for return. So that's how I chose to solve this, using phantom faces instead. There are much more elegant ways to do this, which require a lot more variable cards and a lot more knowledge with two terrible mods side by side. But they somehow managed to make up for the deficiencies and managing to work together in an interesting way. This will also apply to the Hellfire Forge. So the Hellfire Forge itself, it is cited for... Is it cited for... I don't think it is... I don't think the Hellfire Forge is cited for input. So you can... So, specifying... I don't think the Hellfire Forge is cited for input, so you'd have to specify the slots a little bit more directly by playing around with what happens when items get put into, let's say, slot 6 or something like that. There's not 6 slots. Let's say slot 4 or whatever. But the same idea and the same premise can be had here, even though they're on technically 4 sides, 4 inputs, and the top and the bottom also can act as an input and output. I would just recommend using the Phantom Face. That way you can leave the block alone, put it somewhere else, link the Phantom Faces, and you don't have to set it up if you have to move it. Now, this won't work for things like this. The Simple Power Catalyst, it will divide the ingredients evenly. So the first time it will work, but when this chest is cleared, because it's only 3 ingredients, the interface will push another 3 in there, and this will go, oh wow, we've got 3 more null slots. It'll put the 3 in the null slot, and the crafting will stop. So you do have to technically do this setup for each number of slots that you want to use in the table. You can technically use the same table, I guess, if you want. You might have item collision issues, so, I mean, it's only got 6 slots total. You can set up 6 tables, and this is the most complicated it will be. For each less slot, you need one less logic cable, 1 less exporter, and 1 less inventory reader. So there is that. So what I'm actually going to do, real quick, is set up a recipe that requires buckets, and we'll be back shortly. Alright, so I've gone ahead and set up a recipe here. The Aqua Salis, which is a content tweaker item. We're going to go ahead and have 32 of these. And you can see that it will require these stupid fucking water buckets, which will get stuck in the table. But because we have the return here, this will put the item in the chest. Each of them are going to get grabbed one by one. And the empty buckets are getting grabbed by this thing and put back into the system. As you can see, we are getting the empty buckets in, and we are getting the Aqua Salis to be crafted, which is also getting put into the system. So there you go. Properly automatable. Blocking mode in the interface is actually working pretty well. And, yeah, that's how to do it with one table. Like I said before, if you need to use less slots in the table, you are going to need a different table. And you can potentially put another slot in, or a specific slot in blocking mode, if you want. Although, setting it up like this with more phantom faces will kind of remove that need, so you won't have to worry about it too much. But other than that, that's it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I will do my best to take a look at them and answer them. I suck at integrated dynamics, so this was a very much a half-assed solution that took quite a while to figure out. There are definitely going to be better ways to do this if you know how to use the auto-crafting feature with integrated dynamics. I personally would rather subject myself to learning Jython, which is a Python interpreter rewritten in Java, than using integrated dynamics. But hey, to each their own, pain and suffering. So that will be it for me today. Oh, and as always, don't bother subscribing to my channel.